Hello, and thank you for being here. My name is Emi Watanabe, and I'm the author of We Must Know, We Will Connect. This book is more of a manifesto, a structural reflection on how culture and credit might circulate. A second book in the series, We Must Know, We Will Be Here, is also available now. It offers a more accessible guide to how we encounter culture through fieldwork. Both books are available on Kindle as well. Now, let's begin the explanation. From here on, we will enter the most unique part of the two books. It's about formulas. Wait, formulas? Math? Why? I know that's what you're thinking. But for me, this was one way to illuminate without words. When others talk about culture, they tend to wrap it up in evaluative nuances. But with mathematical formulas, perhaps we can show that structure as it is. With that in mind, while I have records of my travels and information on legal systems in various countries, in We Must Know, We Will Connect, I've researched the political, economic, and cultural characteristics of 12 countries and 14 cultural regions. In addition to researching the political, economic, and cultural characteristics of each country and region, we have created a credit culture circle score using mathematical formulas. The first score we used is called the PCCC institutional score. This formula scores 3 axes within the institutional framework: how much culture is generated, how well it circulates, and how open the channels are for acceptance, using 3 axes. iGen represents the system's ability to generate cultural trust. iFlow measures the degree to which that credit circulates internally. iGate represents the degree to which the system is open to accepting culture from external sources. The weighting coefficients, W1, W2, W3, are set to 0.4, 0.4, 0.2. The reason is that we considered the influence of generation and circulation to be significant. While openness of entry is important, in reality, many countries still have access from outside the system is possible, but entry into the system is not permitted. Therefore, we have assigned a slightly lower weight to this factor. All scores are expressed as decimals between 0 and 1. This score is based solely on my personal judgment. Although it is a formula, it is not mathematics. Next is the PTCC score, which represents the cultural aspect. This measures how much culture not integrated into the system exists and whether that culture is attempting to connect with the system. C absence represents the areas of culture that remain outside the system. C connect represents the flexibility or willingness to connect with the system. The weighting coefficients C1 and C2 are set to 0.6. 0.4. The reason is that the size of the unconnected part of culture tends to become a blind spot for the system. On the other hand, the intention to connect is also important, so we balanced it at 0.4. Finally, the product of the institutional score and the cultural score is PX. This score indicates the extent to which the interplay between institutional and cultural factor show much they support each other in an intangible way. Some may wonder, why multiply and then divide by 100? This is a structural normalization to ensure that the result of multiplying ratios does not exceed 100 structural normalization. In terms of meaning, if both institutional and cultural factors are high, the structure is designed to maximize the mutual reinforcement between the two. The data used for each score varies in scale and units. For example, directly comparing investment in institutions, number of languages, and length of history is unfair. To address this, we used the Z-score method. This is a transformation that standardizes all data to have a mean of 0 and a standard deviation of 1. In layman's terms, comparing height and annual income doesn't make sense, but comparing how far each is from the average reveals relative trends. Additionally, within cultures and systems, there are elements that suddenly gain meaning once a certain threshold is crossed. To recreate this threshold sensation, we applied a logistic transformation curve to the z-scores. For example, it's like the curve that describes the phenomenon where water boils the moment it reaches 100 degrees Celsius, suddenly rising phenomenon. Finally, we used k-means clustering to structurally classify the entire dataset. Other methods were considered, but details can be found in the first book, We Will Connect. The number of clusters is 3. These are based on the hypothesis of system-centric, culture-centric, and intermediate types. Clustering is a method that automatically groups similar data into clusters. In more humanities-oriented terms, for example, imagine people gathering together without saying anything, just somehow coming together, and someone observing from above notices, oh, they're starting to form groups. To put it more simply, it's like observing animals gathering near water without knowing why. Of course, these formulas are not perfect analyses. However, when I considered whether it was possible to illuminate culture as a structure rather than score it, formulas became the most honest tool for me. The final formula I'll introduce is ESR score, external social resilience. How do people survive outside the system? This score sheds light on that question. It consists of 3 axes: G-Res, physical resilience, faith and spirituality, health and ancestral healing, and gender and family dynamics. This is resilience rooted in the body and community. G-Flex, flexibility resilience, mobility and diaspora, education that transcends institutional boundaries and the use of informal technologies. In other words, the ability to connect and adapt outside of institutions. G-Path, survival path resilience, when disasters strike, when land and food culture are on the brink of being lost. The wisdom of mutual aid and redistribution has supported people's alternative way of life. This is the path to survival without institutions. These 3 are evaluated on a scale of 1.0, 0.5, and 0.0, and the average is taken. That is the ESR score. Why the average is a question we often hear. It's because the resilience that is valued differs. In the future, we plan to design the system so that the weights can be adjusted and recalculated. However, in this book, we have deliberately kept the weights the same to provide a balanced perspective. We encourage readers to apply these weights to the places you will visit in the future or to your own town. In summary, these 7 formulas are merely tools for not speaking. I hope you will read the book with that perspective in mind. Well, for those of you who have taken the time to read this far, lastly, the connection to structural inclination. I have traveled around the world carrying these 7 equations with me. Now, a question has arisen. It is, what if the center of gravity between systems and culture were misaligned? If one is heavier and the other lighter, and yet they are still trying to force a balance? How can I shed light on this and share it with everyone? When I submitted the manuscript for this book, I arrived at the concept of structural tilt. Let me show you the formula. It's one I've never shared anywhere before. It represents the trust in the culture within the system, as measured by PCCC. That is, the credibility granted by institutions and the power held by culture outside those systems. Why is it subtracted? It is to determine which side, the system or the culture, is more dominant. Why are they added together? It is to combine both and achieve overall balance. The larger the denominator becomes, the closer we get to a state where both systems and culture are strong. However, depending on whether the result of subtracting is positive or negative reveals which influence is stronger. The tilt becomes visible. This is not yet complete. It's not just that culture supports systems. Institutions can also influence culture. I want to be someone who can recognize that tilt, and with that in mind, I plan to continue traveling around the world. This formula is something I plan to use when visiting new places in the future. One day, if I gather enough material, I might turn it into a book, or maybe not. Thank you for watching until the end. I'd be happy to hear your thoughts or new formulas of your own.